Hello, everyone. Welcome back to H&P Podcast, a podcast that helps you breathe a little easier in life. It's great to see you all again in a brand new episode.
Our hearts beat to the city streets. We began to feel the fire. We rise like tall buildings as the chemicals they take us higher. The night's young, it has just begun as she puts her hand in mine.
At some point, we've all been fools. When we first stepped into college, when we started our first job, when we finally mustered the courage to pursue a long-held dream, or simply in the innocent joy of falling in love for the first time. Every beginning comes with a touch of recklessness and a bit of naivety. It gives us the courage to step into uncertainty, pushing us to do things we would never dare attempt if we were wiser and more experienced. Water flows forward without knowing what lies ahead, and the strength of the fool lies in that very unawareness. Because we don't know, we boldly take steps forward, paving paths we never could have foreseen. And because we don't know, we discover both our potential and our limits. And now, the question becomes, if I know that loving means getting hurt, will I still dare to open my heart once more? When people think of the word fool, everyone has their own perception of what it means. But for the most part, no one wants to be seen as a fool. Because by conventional definition, a fool is someone who always ends up at a disadvantage, someone who doesn't fight for their own rights, someone easily taken advantage of, or someone a bit clumsy and lacking social awareness. They could also be people who are too honest, or those who hold on to grand ideals and dreams that the world often dismisses as unrealistic. In love, fools are often called hopeless romantics, people who fall deeply and unconditionally, disregarding practical concerns like finances, family background, distance, or religious beliefs. They don't choose their partners based on societal expectations, nor do they marry for status or security. Instead, they stubbornly pursue their own ideals and live according to that belief. The word fool in English originates from the Latin word follus, meaning an empty bag or a bag full of air. It implies someone empty-headed, naive, and carefree to the point of foolishness. From one perspective, a fool is simply a child who hasn't fully grasped how the world operates. It's not necessarily a sign of weakness, but rather a reflection of innocence and purity. A fool's emptiness may come from a lack of knowledge, but it can also stem from letting go of overthinking, from embracing risks in order to live authentically, and from choosing to walk through life with a lighter, freer heart. In ancient times, fools, or court jesters, were the only ones allowed to mock the king without fear of punishment. They could turn criticism into humorous satire and disguise the truth within playful jokes. What seemed like a harmless job, meant only for entertainment, actually had a very unique relationship with power. Because jesters were unafraid of being laughed at, the king himself didn't feel threatened by their presence. This allowed them to speak the truth as they saw it, and in many cases, their words had the power to influence and even alter the king's decisions. William Shakespeare once wrote, "A fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows himself to be a fool." A fool is not necessarily someone ignorant, but rather someone who understands the limits of knowledge and their own limitations. They are unafraid of being laughed at because they know how to laugh at their own shortcomings. And instead of trying to prove they are wiser and more knowledgeable than others, they observe, they listen, and they learn. In the classic Rider-Waite Tarot deck, first published in 1909, the very first card, the Fool, symbolizes the beginning of a new journey and an unwavering belief in what the fool can achieve. This character is depicted as a young man full of ideals and optimism. He holds a white rose in his hand, his head held high, gazing forward, with a small, neatly packed bundle slung over his shoulder. Beside him, a dog warns him of the dangers ahead, but he continues walking without hesitation, unaware that a deep chasm lies just before him. Youthful beginnings are often simple because we still carry light burdens. All we need is what we already have: dreams, passion, enthusiasm, and a pure curiosity about the world around us. Free from financial pressures and family responsibilities, we move forward without worry, acting on instinct and following our intuition. We are unafraid to ask questions, to challenge what we believe is wrong, to fight for what we stand for, and to hope for a better world. This is why political and social movements often gain traction in universities, because when we are still students, we have the time to read, explore, and debate larger issues. We have strong opinions on how society operates and often speak out about things that older generations may dismiss as unrealistic or impractical. When we first step into the real world of adulthood, everything becomes more complicated. The clear black and white perspectives we once held start to blur into shades of gray, and we gradually realize that we cannot change the state of society with just a few social media posts or a couple of passionate speeches online. In The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, we see a 16-year-old Holden Caulfield full of anger at a world he perceives as fake and materialistic. That anger is accompanied by a sense of helplessness, an inability to create change, except for his dream of becoming the catcher in the rye, a guardian of innocence for children. Holden wants to be there to catch them before they fall into the abyss of adulthood. He clings to the beauty of innocence, but over time, he must accept that everyone eventually grows up, and the world does not operate the way we wish it did. Hopeless romantics must learn to face heartbreak. Those who love sincerely must come to terms with the fact that giving does not always mean receiving. The friendships we once cherished will inevitably fade, not because of right or wrong, nor because of blame, but simply because we choose different paths, diverging directions, and life fills that distance with new relationships and priorities. As the world moves forward, we must learn to change and adapt. The fool must keep walking, facing new challenges, and children must learn to stumble and fall in order to grow. Life does not pause for yesterday's innocence, and we do not have the power to control everything, but innocence still lingers somewhere, in the way we choose to love again, to trust after being hurt, and to open our hearts to embrace the world as it is. A pure stream will inevitably carry the traces of where it has been, the rain, the storms, the sediment, and all the life it has touched. But it keeps flowing forward, through all the ups and downs, never once looking back. Adulthood does not force us to abandon our dreams, but it constantly challenges our determination to pursue them. Vincent van Gogh, one of the most influential painters of all time, was once seen as a fool, a madman, for dedicating his life to art in an era that failed to recognize his style, talent, and vision. He was not only rejected, but also ridiculed, living in poverty and isolation throughout his artistic journey. His work only gained recognition after his death, so he never knew, and could never have known, the impact he would leave on the world of art. But he knew he had lived fully for his passion. People still wonder, how did Van Gogh find the motivation to paint when so few cared about his work? But perhaps painting was one of the only things that made him feel truly alive. In a letter to his brother, Theodorus van Gogh, in 1880, Vincent wrote, "I consider this journey a shipwreck. Well, one cannot do as one wants, nor as one ought either. Once I got out a little into the park, I recovered my clarity for work. I have more ideas in my head than I could ever put into action, but without it dazzling me. The path we choose may not always bring the results we desire, and the path we should take may not be the one we want to take. The truth is, we don't just make this decision once. We must make it over and over, every single day. Should we keep going, or should we stop and choose a safer path? Vincent van Gogh chose art. He chose to capture his ideas and use every ounce of his ability to bring them to life. He placed art above his personal needs, something not everyone can do. Van Gogh chose to live and adventure through his art, to pursue painting with relentless dedication, and he never regretted it. Because in the end, beauty and love are what bring true meaning and emotion to this life. I still remember how I felt the first time I stood inside the National Gallery in London, looking at the Van Gogh paintings on display. It was a feeling that was hard to describe, incredibly humbling. It gave me hope, and it made me believe that what the world sees as foolishness can sometimes be wisdom in our personal journeys. Everyone has the right to dream, but not all dreams are the same. Some dreams are built on faith and noble values, while others are merely illusions of greed and deceit. A famous scholar once said, "Cunning with malice is foolishness. Foolishness with kindness is wisdom." And Elizabeth Holmes is a prime example of this paradox. Elizabeth Holmes built Theranos on the claim that her blood testing technology could perform hundreds of different tests using just a single drop of blood. This idea created massive buzz, leading the media and investors to believe that Theranos was a groundbreaking innovation and that Elizabeth Holmes was on the verge of revolutionizing global medicine. Theranos was valued at $9 billion, making Holmes the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world at the time. But in 2018, the truth about Theranos was exposed. A series of articles in the Wall Street Journal revealed the fraudulent operations behind Elizabeth Holmes's company, from using shell companies to purchase conventional blood testing devices to outsourcing Theranos's tests to external labs. Holmes fabricated reports to deceive investors and used NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to silence and intimidate employees, preventing them from exposing Theranos's lack of transparency. But in the end, Holmes's empire of dreams collapsed. In 2022, Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as a genius and a symbol of innovation, was sentenced to 11 years in prison for fraud. From the pinnacle of fame, she became a cautionary tale for the startup world. To this day, Theranos remains one of the most shocking scandals in Silicon Valley. But this wasn't the first time Silicon Valley aggressively promoted unfinished and unproven products. This culture is deeply rooted in the mindset of fake it till you make it, a common ideology in the tech industry. Fake it till you make it can be a source of motivation, but it can also push many businesses to trade transparency for attention. It tempts them to exaggerate their capabilities rather than focusing on the actual value they can bring to society and their communities. It turns dreams, once seemingly beautiful, into an obsession with fame, power, legacy, and greatness, no matter the cost. A person may use manipulation and calculation to climb higher in society and achieve the success they desire. But if that success is built on deception, will it be sustainable? We all want to succeed, but are we willing to sacrifice ethics, integrity, and our personal values to achieve it? Today's society has more cunning opportunists than wise fools. It has more people willing to deceive for short-term gain than those who truly pour their hearts into what they do. Kindness and sincerity may not bring immediate rewards, but they help us build a strong foundation from which we can steadily pursue our long-term goals with resilience. Most of us are not Vincent van Gogh, painting despite poverty and isolation. Nor are we Elizabeth Holmes, stopping at nothing to gain fame and power. We do not live at those two extremes. We are ordinary people, living ordinary lives, with dreams and aspirations that are not too far-fetched. And yet, every day, we still have to make countless choices. And some choices will seem riskier and more foolish than others. Choosing to pursue an unstable career instead of a secure job. Choosing to walk away from a relationship with no future instead of holding on, hoping the other person will change. Or abandoning a well-laid-out path to venture into something new, even when we have no idea how it will turn out. About 6 or 7 years ago, I attended an art exhibition in Singapore and happened to run into an acquaintance there. At the time, he was a manager at a well-known marketing agency, while I had just graduated from university and started working. I don't remember how the conversation started or how it ended, but I still remember the part where he talked about his dream career, how he wanted to become an interior designer. Back then, I asked him, "If you want to be an interior designer, why don't you go for it?" And he replied, "Well, at your age, you can still start over. But for me, I'm too old, too grown up. Starting over is really hard." He was probably around 27 or 28 years old at the time, the same age I am now. I don't know if he ever became an interior designer because, truthfully, when I say he was an acquaintance, he was actually just a friend of a friend. But I still remember this story because it made me think a lot about pursuing dreams and starting over. I wrote about this story in a personal post, and recently, while working on this video script, I revisited it. And I realized that this story isn't just about age, it's also about stability, confidence, the ability to face failure, family pressures, and the judgment of others. The truth is, if we sit down and analyze things long enough, we can always find enough reasons to stop, to delay, or even to give up on our dreams. Sometimes we think we're too old. Other times, we feel like we're not ready, that the timing isn't right, that we're not good enough, or that maybe the dream was never meant for us in the first place. But the truth is, we will never feel ready or good enough unless we take the first step. Nobody starts as an expert. For me, the feeling of incompleteness, the regret, and the endless what-ifs are scarier than what others might think of me, or even the fear of failure itself. I believe it's never too late to start something you've always wanted to pursue, whether it's education, career, or love. I'm also a hopeless romantic, someone deeply in love with life, and I know that sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it can get a little depressing, but I also know it's worth it. The Catcher in the Rye is a book that many people love, but it was also widely criticized for a long time. I could never understand why a piece of literature could evoke such extreme reactions. But recently, I think I've started to get it. Holden Caulfield is a teenager born into a privileged family. He attends a prestigious school in New York City, a starting point that not everyone is fortunate enough to have. Yet, he deeply resents the world around him, constantly feeling lost and disconnected. For some, Holden is a relatable character, offering comfort and understanding, a voice for the youth who feel trapped between ideals and reality. But for others, he's nothing more than an annoying, privileged rich kid, a spoiled brat who whines too much. Perhaps people's feelings about the book say more about their own life experiences than about Holden's story itself. It shows us that sometimes naivety is seen as a privilege. Not everyone has the luxury of being naive. And this isn't just about financial stability. It's also about the ability to accept and manage risk. An accountant might dream of becoming an artist, but do they have the courage to abandon a stable career? And even if they do they have the financial means to sustain their dream? Someone might want to speak up for what they believe is right, but are they willing to sacrifice their reputation, social standing, relationships, or personal safety? In a society where financial pressures and social mobility weigh heavily on individuals, making an unwise choice can lead to significant consequences. No choice is perfect, and once we make a decision, there's no way to know what would have happened had we chosen differently. There are endless possibilities, and no matter what we choose, there will always be something we have to sacrifice. So, be bold. Make a choice so you won't have regrets. We don't have to give up everything to become a fool, but all of us need a little bit of innocence and foolishness on our journey through life. Because innocence gives us something far more valuable than calculations, hesitations, and weighing pros and cons. It gives us the freedom to chase what we truly want and to live our lives to the fullest. This world still needs fools, people who dare to take risks to chase their dreams, to create, to explore, and to make changes. Because if everyone only followed the paths already laid out for them, perhaps we wouldn't have Starry Night, we wouldn't have paintings, songs, or books that move our hearts, and we wouldn't have the inventions that have changed humanity. I'll wrap up my thoughts here for today's episode. If you found this content valuable, please consider sharing it with your friends and loved ones. And as always, since YouTube's algorithm favors videos with more likes, if you enjoyed this one, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the like button. It helps more people discover our podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I wish you all a peaceful evening.